Hello, welcome to the Botanical Night. This is night on October 7 to October 8, and this is one of Kyoto streets, not far away from Fushimi Inari, the famous shrine with multiple gates. And here is a small shop, and one of my friends pointed me to that shop because he said it's very unusual. Yes, it's really unusual because it's Banksia. Banksia integrifolia, one of Australian plants which I never ever expected to see it growing in Kyoto. Actually, it is growing. I think this is kind of, well, open ground. It's very close to the wall of the building, so it's much warmer than in typical outgrow cultivation. But actually, I think the tree is, well, kind of persisted through the winter. And today, on October 7, you can see wonderful flowers of Banksia. Actually, flowers and both fruits of last year are present. So they're so remarkable. It's extremely hard to say anything else except Banksia. Banksia is kind of emblematic plant of Australia. And that particular species grow on Australian east. But normally Banksias are widespread all over Australian continent. And what is remarkable, they're extremely hard to cultivate outside of Australia. Yes, it is possible. But Banksias, like many Australian plants, do not like phosphorus. Actually, don't like high concentration of phosphorus because phosphorus is required to synthesize DNA. So they must have it, but in a very small concentration. If concentration of phosphorus is too high, these plants will simply die. So this is wonderful to see Banksia on the streets of Kyoto, which is kind of normal Japanese environment. Also, Banksia doesn't like wet weather, but as you see here, it grows, and that particular small tree, well, at least several years old. At least it is already, well, went through the several Japanese wet seasons, which is wonderful to know how flexible are Banksias if you cultivate them. Of course, that species is probably most phosphorus and most rain tolerant species of Banksia for cultivation. This is, well, it explains something why it is cultivated. So how to know Banksias? Well, easily. Only Banksias have that wonderful forked branching, and in the forks of branches there will be very interesting fruits which are so similar to cones that sometimes people call it cones. So very interesting about Banksia happens these fruits after the fires. So, well, it's very unlucky to grow here for Australian Banksia because, well, in the town they don't like fires, but in the wild Banksias are only germinating after the fire. So these fruits are typically open after heating, then seeds will be released. And flowers of Banksia, well, similarly to fruits, are condensed, so inflorescence is very tight and will provide this infructescence in the end. And you can see how tight are flowers of Banksia. It is family Proteaceae. Proteaceae is extremely old group, has lots of interesting features of flowering, pollinated sometimes with unusual agents. For example, Banksias sometimes are pollinated with mammals, with night mammals. By the way, what is the odor? Well, wow, strange odor, unusual, I would say, kind of, well, a bit like toilet, I would say. Not exactly, but kind of, well, strange odor, some kind of musk odor maybe. Anyway, very interesting odor. Maybe this is Banksia species which supposed to be pollinated with some unusual animals. Well, supposedly absent in Kyoto, but as you see fruits, well, it might be self-pollinated as well. So pollination of Proteaceae is very interesting. Well, in short, I don't want to have details for you because it's very hard to show it right now, but it's based on kind of springs. So parts of flower will be released and jump out and then release, for example, pollen to outside of flower. So Banksias are evergreen. Normally they have also leaves with prickles, and on that plant prickles are almost absent. Sometimes you can see them, but normally in that plant at least prickles are not developed, which is typically very characteristic for the wet climates. The drier is the climate, the more prickles are present on leaves and the stems, and this is explainable. In a dry climate, photosynthesis may be good, but water is absent, so growth is so slow that you should guard your vegetative part against herbivores, and this is why they have prickles so much. Anyway, so this is almost without prickles, but still recognizable by forks, condensed inflorescences, and wonderful fruits, which again in the wild are open after fires, and seeds will germinate only after fires in Australia, in the native region. Again, Australian Banksia in Kyoto on the night from October 7 to October 8. Thank you very much.